Imagine this. It's a blazing Tuesday afternoon. Sunlight is pouring through the tall, glass windows of a high school classroom, casting long, sharp silhouettes of every desk, every chair, and every student onto the scuffed wooden floor. You're the teacher. You're pacing the aisles, checking on your students during a quiet exam. You walk past the back row, and you glance down at a polite, quiet boy named Lam Tu Min. The midday sun is hitting him directly. But when you look at the floor, there's nothing there. No shadow. Just an empty patch of sunlight stretching across the wood where his silhouette should be. You blink. You look back. He's still there, scribbling away with perfect penmanship. But the light is passing right through him. What do you do? Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today, we are not looking at a documented police file. Instead, we're diving into one of the strangest, most enduring legends whispered among old school educators in Southeast Asia. It's a story passed down through generations of teachers. A chilling piece of folklore born from a very real, very dark chapter of history. Turn off the lights, sit back, and let me tell you the legend of the boy with no shadow. Our story is set in a sprawling, colonial-era secondary school in Vietnam. Picture French colonial architecture, sweeping archways, peeling yellow paint, and louvered windows. The man running the school was Principal D. He was a strict administrator, a former mathematics professor who operated strictly on logic and empirical data. To him, ghost stories were just excuses made up by superstitious students to get out of night classes. But that worldview was about to take a massive hit. It started in late October, just before midterm exams. A young literature teacher named Ms. Mai walked into Principal D's office. She wasn't hysterical, but she looked exhausted, clutching a stack of graded papers. "Mr. D," she said, her voice tight, "there is an issue in room 304 with a boy named Lam Tu Min." A principal didn't look up from his paperwork. "Is he acting out? Cheating?" "No," she replied, her voice dropping to a whisper. "His test scores are flawless. He sits perfectly still. But Mr. D, I don't think he is a living person." D finally looked up, irritated. But Ms. Mai's face was dead serious. "I've been watching him," she explained. "Yesterday, the sun hit his desk, and he cast no shadow. At first, I thought my eyes were tired. But today, I wiped down the blackboard. When I turned around, I noticed the chalk dust settling on the floor near his desk. Mr. D, the dust didn't settle around his shoes. It settled through them. There was no physical displacement. And he never blinks." A Principal D, determined to shut down this ridiculous rumor before it spread to the student body, told her he would personally observe room 304 the following afternoon. The next day at 2:00 p.m., D sat quietly in a chair at the front of room 304. His eyes were locked on the back corner. There he was. Lam Tu Min. He wore the standard crisp white button-down shirt. His head was bowed over a history textbook. But as D stared, the mathematical, logical part of his brain began to short-circuit. Ms. Mai was right. The boy cast absolutely no shadow. But it was the other details that truly unnerved D. It wasn't a sudden drop in temperature. It wasn't a flickering light bulb. Those things happen in old buildings. No, it was the sheer, unnatural stillness of the boy. D watched his chest for 5 straight minutes. It didn't rise. It didn't fall. The boy wasn't breathing. And then, the bell rang. The students stood up, shuffling their chairs, chatting, packing their bags. In the chaos of the shifting crowd, a group of students walked right past the back desk. One student, carrying a heavy backpack, swung around and his bag passed directly through Lam Tu Min's shoulder. The boy didn't flinch. In fact, for a split second, the boy's face seemed to ripple like a reflection in a disturbed puddle before solidifying again. D immediately went to the archives. He bypassed the physical files and went straight to the old, retired groundskeeper, an elderly man who had worked at the school since the late 1960s. Dee asked him if he knew anything about a boy named Lam Tiu Min. The old man went completely still. He looked down the hallway, ensuring no one was listening, before ushering Dee into his supply closet. "You've seen the boy at the back of the class," the old man rasped. It wasn't a question. The groundskeeper didn't pull out a dusty newspaper clipping. Instead, he told Dee a truth that the local administration had spent decades trying to bury. During the early 1940s, the region was caught in the brutal crossfire of the Japanese occupation of French Indochina. It was a chaotic, devastating era of complex military administration. Food was systematically requisitioned, leading to a catastrophic famine that wiped out a staggering portion of the population. This school building had been requisitioned, but it wasn't a command post. The sealed-off sub-level, the deep basement beneath the oldest wing, was used as a makeshift, off-the-books holding area. During the height of the famine, orphans found wandering the streets were rounded up and placed down there to keep them out of the public eye. The conditions were horrific: no light, barely any rations, and when a severe outbreak of dysentery swept through the overcrowded basement in the winter of 1944, the doors were simply locked from the outside. Dozens of children died in the pitch black, right beneath the floorboards of the very classrooms they were never allowed to enter. Dee realized with a sickening twist in his gut that Lam Tiu Min wasn't one ghost. Min was a collective manifestation, the lingering, starved consciousness of all those orphan children. They didn't come back as poltergeists to throw chairs or terrorize the living. They manifested as a quiet, perfect student because, in their final, terrifying moments, all they wanted was to sit in the sun, read a book, and be normal kids. That night, Dee didn't call a priest or a shaman. He knew an exorcism wouldn't work on grief. At midnight, he walked down to the oldest wing of the school, stopping at the heavy, chained-up doors of the old basement. He didn't open it. He didn't need to, because as he stood there in the dark hallway, the haunting evolved. There were no cliché cold breezes or visible breath. Instead, Dee heard a sound that made the hairs on his arms stand up. It started as a faint scratch. Then, it multiplied. It sounded like 50 pieces of chalk furiously writing on slate, echoing from inside the walls themselves. Dee looked down at his feet. The hallway floor was coated in a thin layer of plaster dust from recent renovations. Slowly, impossibly, indentations began to form in the dust. Tiny, bare footprints, dozens of them. They didn't walk, they just appeared, pressing into the dust all around him, trapping him in a circle of invisible, standing children. Dee looked up. On the peeling yellow plaster of the hallway wall, a dark, heavy liquid began to seep through the paint, spelling out words in archaic, perfect cursive, B-U-E-R-E-R, B-U-E-Y-N-T-L-A-E-R, and Dee fell to his knees. Surrounded by the invisible weight of 50 dead children, the strict, logical principle broke down. "I know," Dee whispered to the empty air, tears spilling down his face. "I am so sorry you were left in the dark. I am the principal here. And I am telling you, you are my students. You belong here." The furious scratching sound inside the walls abruptly stopped. For a long, agonizing minute, the hallway was dead silent. Then, the tiny footprints in the dust slowly smoothed over, as if a gentle hand had wiped them away. The dark ink on the walls faded back into the plaster. The legend goes that the next morning, Principal De opened the master's school registry. With his own fountain pen, he wrote down a new entry: student name, Lam Tiu Min, status enrolled. After that day, the terrifying anomalies in the hallways stopped. The visual apparition of the boy, with no shadow, never appeared in the daytime classes again. But if you think this is a fairy tale where the ghosts just smile and move on to the afterlife, you don't know Southeast Asian folklore. They didn't leave. they just became official students. Decades have passed since Principal D's tenure. The school has been modernized with computers and digital databases, but the physical ledger remains in the administration office. Over the years, new, skeptical administrators have tried to archive that old ledger or physically cross out the name Lam Tu Min to clean up the records. Every time someone crosses it out, they return the next morning to find the strike through completely gone. The name Lam Tu Min is always rewritten, pressed so deeply into the paper with a heavy ink pen that it almost tears the page. And if you ever visit that school, go to room 304. Look at the desk in the very back row, next to the window. The teachers don't assign a student to that seat anymore. They leave it empty. But if you walk up to that chair on the absolute coldest, most freezing morning of the winter, and you place your hand on the wooden seat, it is unnervingly, impossibly warm. And if the room is quiet enough, you just might hear the faint, scratching sound of a heavy pen taking perfect notes. So, next time you're sitting in an old classroom and you notice a shadow that doesn't quite match the light, don't stare. Just look back down at your paper and let them learn. Thanks for listening, guys. If you want more deep dives into these obscure urban legends, hit that subscribe button, and as always, stay safe out there.